The night my husband called me decor in front of his board was the night I stopped being quiet. I learned that money has its own weather system the first time I walked into the luxury gala. The air conditioning didn't just cool you, it appraised you. It measured hemlines and last names, tallied stock options against lineage, and blew cold or warm accordingly. Tonight, my husband, Grayson Vale, CEO of Vale Dynamics, was the storm's eye. I stepped from the black car in a dress I bought on sale and altered within an inch of its life. The beading glowed like wet stars under the camera banks. His hand hovered at my elbow, not quite touching. Escorting, not embracing. Possessing, not partnering. Smile, he murmured, eyes still on the flashbulbs. They love a smile. So I smiled. I smiled while we moved through velvet ropes that parted for his last name. I smiled while an usher with a headset whispered, "Welcome back, Mr. Vale," and barely clocked me. I smiled at board members wearing tuxedos like uniforms. Malcolm Pierce, the chair, with that sandpaper charm. Ivy Chen, the CFO, crisp as a geometry proof. And on Grayson's right, his mother, Evelyn Vale, a glacier refrozen into pearls. She once told me, philanthropy is just strategy in nicer shoes. And I never forgot the way she looked at my flats. The ballroom was all gold light and low laughter. Chandeliers spilled down like struck matches. At the center, a glossy stage waited for the charity auction. Private vineyards, weekend yachts, abstract paintings that would hang in homes big enough to echo. A camera jib swept the room, and I felt its shadow cross my collarbone like a question. Who are you here? I wasn't always an accessory. Before Grayson, I ran programs for a nonprofit shoestringing clinics across counties that mapmakers forget. I thought capital meant letters at the beginning of sentences. I thought love meant curiosity, the way he used to ask about my grumpy volunteers and grant deadlines. He fell for the part of me that believed in people. Then he taught me how rooms like this believed in price tags. We reached our assigned table, front, left, where the real decisions sit disguised as donations. Grayson didn't introduce me. He set me down like a centerpiece and started working the edges. He was incandescent. The board, the investors, the old guard with cufflinks older than me. He knew their kids' lacrosse teams, their preferred single malts, their burn rates. He floated. I fogged. A waiter offered champagne. I took one and another. Bubbles made my ribs feel stitched together with silk thread. "Lovely to see you again," Malcolm said, mouth smiling, eyes scanning elsewhere. "You too," I lied. Ivy glanced at my clutch, at my shoes, then at my face. She nodded once like a metronome. Evelyn air-kissed me from 6 inches away, the exact distance from which she liked her compassion dispensed. A younger server slipped by and whispered, "You look beautiful," like a secret apology. I thanked her with my eyes because that's what women do in these rooms. We semaphore kindness across oceans of indifference. The MC warmed up the crowd. The auctioneer tested the microphone and money, right on cue, pretended to be coy. Grayson leaned into Malcolm, tossed his head back at a joke that hadn't landed yet. I watched him from a place I used to think was ours, and understood, with a steady little ache, that it had always been his. Humiliation is a quiet instrument. It doesn't crash, it hums. It threads through your posture, your vowels, the way you arrange your napkin like you might apologize to the linen. I twirled the stem of my glass and counted the pecking order like rosary beads. Board first. Then investors, then legacy families, then spouses who knew their lanes, Instagrammable, audible only in laughter, seasonal like centerpieces. I am not naive. I know optics matter. I just hadn't realized I'd been reduced to them. The auctioneer lifted a paddle. The room pitched forward. Grayson rose for a toast. His cufflinks glinted like teeth. I felt a pressure change, the way you feel before thunder, and I knew the weather was about to turn on me. Then he raised his glass and turned my name into a punchline. "Don't worry, gentlemen. Tessa's just here to look pretty." He said it laughing, but it landed like a slap. The table laughed because that's what tables like ours do. They laugh on schedule. A few men winced, the way you wince at a documentary you won't donate to. I heard my name ricochet off crystal. Pretty. A ribbon on a box. Decorative. Replaceable. I kept my face still, sculpted in the good girl marble he liked in public. Inside, something braced. Malcolm chuckled and tapped his knife against his glass. "We all appreciate good design," he said, vague and oily. Ivy didn't laugh. She pressed her lips together as if the numbers on her internal spreadsheet had just gone red. Evelyn's smile sharpened. My humiliation had cleared the fog off her evening. Grayson kept performing. He told a tidy story about Vale Dynamics Quarter. Efficiencies gained, partnerships looming. He gestured at me like a chandelier. "Tessa keeps me sane with all her charitable ways," he added, letting charitable bend like a paperclip. "Reminds me there's a world outside EBITDA." Laughter again, practiced and photogenic. The server, the same young woman who'd whispered I looked beautiful, ghosted past and breathed. "I'm sorry." So softly it barely touched the air. I blinked hard. If I swallowed, I thought, I could drown. I studied faces, memorizing them the way you memorize the features of a fire you might someday describe to investigators. Malcolm. Amused, calculating. Ivy. Cool, watchful, somewhere between ally and auditor. Evelyn. Satisfied, like cruelty confirmed a theory she'd held about me since our first lunch, where I de-ordered soup, and she de-ordered me. I kept my hands folded, my nails grazing the seam of my clutch where I hid a pen out of habit. In my old nonprofit life, I took notes on napkins. Tonight, I wrote on the inside of my cheek. Remember, the auction swept on, a carousel of luxury packaging generosity. Grayson bid on a helicopter wine tour for the team. Cameras loved him. I watched the social hierarchy flex its muscles. Old money swanning, new money strutting, philanthropy pirouetting between them like a ballerina telling you not to look at her feet. I could have made a scene. I pictured it, the mic in my hand, my voice an invoice. But there is a cost to public rage, and women pay it at a surcharge. So I smiled. I lifted my glass and let the bubbles floss the anger from my teeth. I told a benign story to the woman on my left about a rescue dog we never rescued. I stared across the room at the stage lights until they blurred into meteors, and I made a wish I could not yet name. Then I felt it. The weight of a gaze that wasn't predatory or pitying. Concern, edged with humor. I turned. Across the aisle, a man in a midnight suit met my eyes and didn't look away. Not a flirt. A witness. He raised his glass once. Not to Grayson. Not to the room. To me. I didn't smile back. I couldn't. But some small, stubborn part of me sat up straighter under his attention, like a plant rotating toward a window. The night droned on. Decor, I repeated in my head, letting the syllables rub blister into resolve. When the orchestra finally switched from elegant to end, I stood, careful, and moved toward the corridor where the air smelled less expensive. Footsteps fell in beside me. The man from across the aisle didn't introduce himself the way men here usually did, with their resumes. He simply said, "That was ugly." I looked up. His eyes were the color of a storm you could navigate by, if you wanted to. "I've seen uglier," I said, my voice flat and adult. He nodded like that answer passed a test he hadn't told me about. Then he pressed a card into my palm and said, "When you're ready to be taken seriously, call me." Jackson Reed wasn't just anybody. He was the kind of anybody who could move markets. I didn't flip the card right away. I pressed it to my skin like a cooling stone and let my pulse make decisions my mouth couldn't consenti. When I finally looked, the letters were so clean they looked surgical. Jackson Reed Biotech. The name rippled through my memory from headlines and panels. Breakthroughs in biologics, a supply chain built like a nervous system, adaptive, fast, precise. Why me? I asked, because I'd learned men like flattery but respect a straight line. He shifted so we stood half in shadow, half in chandelier light. Because I've seen that laugh before, he said, glancing back toward the ballroom. The one that says you're ornamental until you cost something. I waited. Silence is a tool too, if you let it work. What would you build? He asked. If someone believed you could? The answer had been living rent-free behind my teeth for months. A modular cold chain fix, I said, the words tasting like oxygen. You lose 20-ish% of biologics to temperature drift between warehouse and clinic. Not spoiled exactly, compromised. We can shrink that window. Sensorized containers that talk to each other, dynamic routing, predictive re-icing. A system that babysits the medicine instead of assuming the truck will. He didn't blink. And the business case? Salvage rates improve margins. Patients get viable meds faster. Insurers stop paying for waste. Manufacturers reduce write-offs. Everyone hates shrink. You just need someone to own the first mile and the last mile with equal stubbornness. Jackson smiled like a man hearing his favorite chord. And where do you fit? I built programs on shoestrings, I said. I know how to stretch trust. I don't need naming rights. I need data rights. Prove it small, then scale like we meant to all along. The corridor hummed with distant applause. For a second, I heard my own voice back when Grayson loved it. Fast, nerdy, too honest. I felt seen, the exact opposite of decor. It wore like strength. Jackson leaned against a marble column. Men like your husband don't hate heart, he said. They hate not owning it. Grayson isn't the problem, I lied reflexively, and immediately hated that I still protected his silhouette. Maybe, Jackson said, polite enough to let me save face. Send me a one-pager. Numbers, timeline, partners you'd trust. If it's real, it lives. Why me? I asked again, softer. Because you didn't sell me a savior, he said. You sold me a system. Somewhere back in the ballroom, the auctioneer crowed, sold, and another yacht changed nouns. Jackson checked his watch, then looked back at me as if recalibrating. You have my email, he said. Don't send it from their servers, and don't show it to anyone who laughs with their eyes. His advice landed like a parachute pack. Reassurance I hadn't asked for, exactly what I needed. I slid the card into my clutch, next to the pen, next to the woman I had been before I learned how to keep her quiet. As he started to go, I called after him. If you hate waste as much as your interviews say you do, I said, then you'll like my math. He grinned. I love math, he said, especially when it makes enemies. He pivoted back toward the light. I stood for a beat, steadying, then drifted toward the restroom where I could breathe without performing. The hallway smelled faintly of lilies and ambition. I didn't know it yet, but the next door I touched would open on a truth that would cauterize any nostalgia I still had for my husband's charm. Send me a one-pager by Monday, he said. If it's as good as you say, I'll put 7 on the table. I didn't mean to hear Grayson, but the bathroom door was half open, and my life was on speaker. The ladies' room was a cathedral of marble, echoey, expensive, a place built for women to fix what men broke in public. I touched up lipstick I didn't need, and practiced a neutral face in the mirror. Then I heard it. Grayson's voice, close, too close. I followed the sound to the adjoining family lounge. Its door cracked like an invitation no one meant. Inside, Grayson's reflection tilted across a gold-framed mirror while he spoke on speakerphone, hands busy with his cufflinks like a man polishing a lie. Relax, Owen, he said, amused. She's charity PR. I married optics, not operations. Owen Briggs, his VP, the one with the smile that sold you a bridge and then charged tolls, laughed tinny through the phone. You've got to admit she photographs well. Grayson chuckled. She couldn't close a lemonade stand, but the board eats up the wholesome, makes me look balanced. The words didn't hit like a slap this time. They hit like a diagnosis. The truth had been tasting me for months. Now it took a bite. I watched him in the mirror, the man I kissed goodnight and good morning, the man who set his watch by markets and expected me to set mine by his moods. He leaned closer to the camera on his screen to check his own smile. Owen said something about the new logistics partnership. We should loop Tessa for the photo op, he added. Grayson smirked. We'll loop her when I need a hug on camera. Until then, let's keep grown-ups on the email. The bathroom's marble carried everything. His superiority, my heartbeat. I should have left. I should have spared myself the rest. I stayed. Sometimes leverage finds you in the places you hate most. Also, Grayson added, tone cooling. My mother is worried I'm indulging the nonprofit shtick too much. I told her it's good optics. Donors love a wife who bakes. I felt the burn travel from my ears to my shoulders. A slow fuse. He wasn't cruel because of the room. The room was cruel because of him. My memory rewound. Comments disguised as banter. Instructions disguised as care. Boundaries disguised as budgets. The fog cleared. The air tasted like metal. Anyway, he said, let's line up the board breakfast this week. Malcolm likes to be flattered before he's asked for anything, and Ivy needs cleaner numbers than the last deck. Try not to give her a reason to embarrass me. Copy, Owen said. And the wife. The decor, Grayson said, and I didn't need to see his face to know his smile. She'll smile. I stepped back from the door, careful not to breathe too loud. The dress suddenly weighed more. I tucked the hurt somewhere I could access later, like a tool. I didn't leave quietly because quiet had been my prison. I left with a plan. If I was going to go, I'd go with a lever long enough to move something he loved more than the mirror. The hallway had cooled while I listened. Somewhere far away, the band struck a jaunty number. I walked out into the corridor, spine straightening with a new geometry. The humiliation had done its work. The rage had found form. I had an idea, a card, and now, thanks to his arrogance, a reason to sharpen both. And leverage was about to find me first. Buried in our prenup was the one clause he never thought I'd read, let alone use. After the gala, I didn't sleep. I watched the skyline yawn into Monday and brewed coffee like a ritual for the person I was about to resurrect. Our condo, glass, quiet, immaculate, looked like a hotel for people who married their calendars. Grayson was already gone, rowing toward a meeting he'd pretend was spontaneous. I sat at the dining table and opened the black accordion file our attorney had called standard. Divorce wasn't on my mind. Power was. The clause lived where lawyers hide magic, in definitions and footnotes. Rainmaker Provision, it was titled, an adorable bit of swagger. In the event that a spouse officer originates $5 million or more in new, trackable revenue for Veil Dynamics, said spouse earns a voting board seat for 1 term. A ceremonial olive branch, Grayson had joked when we signed. We're partners, he'd said. Let's look like it. I read it twice, then a third time. The language was tight. No wiggle for intent, only for outcomes. It didn't say employee. It said spouse officer, which I technically was. Strategic partner, a title Evelyn had suggested with a smile that smelled like a museum. My duties were undefined. My value, apparently, was decorative. But the clause didn't care about duties. It cared about dollars. I remembered Jackson 7. 7 is greater than 5, greater enough to wipe the smirk off a legacy. I called our former counsel, mine now, and asked a hypothetical. If one were to originate a contract with outside capital, I said, Would that count? If it routes through Vale as revenue, she replied, and you can show origination, then yes, but you'll make enemies. Good, I said, and meant it like therapy. Flashback. Our courtship. The week Grayson showed me Paris through spreadsheets. I'd been charmed by the efficiency. He sent flowers on a schedule because he respected consistency. He asked me to attend one board dinner, just to see, then another, because you're such a calming presence. When he proposed, the ring was perfect, and the timing optimized to eclipse an earnings miss. I didn't see the calculus for what it was. I called it romance in a dialect I barely spoke. Back at the table, I marked the clause with a yellow tab and wrote, in a margin I wasn't supposed to use, 7 beats 5. The rest of the morning I spent building a custody plan for my idea. I created a new email, registered Monroe Strategies LLC, and bought a cheap laptop that would never touch Vale Wi-Fi. I listed people I could trust, and the half-truths I could tell to keep them safe. It wasn't that I wanted to hurt him, it's that I refused to keep handing him the knife. I texted myself a to-do list like a heartbeat. Draft one-pager, model ROI, identify pilot sites, vendor shortlist, legal review, don't flinch. By noon, the condo sunlight had turned mean. I closed the file, slid it back into its cradle, and imagined Grayson's face when he discovered the world had rules he didn't write. He'd underestimated me on purpose because it made him feel taller. Men like that forget that the floor can rise. I stared out at the city, at the veins of traffic moving things where they were needed or not. A logistics fix is a love story, I thought suddenly. You notice the place's care leaks, and you patch them. You promise what matters another chance to arrive alive. 7 beats 5. I wrote until my hands shook, then rewrote until the shaking stopped. The bones came first. Problem. Proof. Path. I typed like a stenographer for a future version of me who would need this document to testify. Problem. Cold chain losses in biologics are an unsexy hemorrhage, 18 to 22% compromised between warehouse and clinic due to temperature drift, handling errors, and static routing. Proof. Peer-reviewed studies, insurer data, internal call notes from clinics who babysit coolers with prayers. Path. A modular system. Sensorized containers networked to a dashboard that predicts, alerts, and reroutes. Dynamic dry ice replenishment. Driver training that treats medicine like premature infants, not pallets. I named it Aurora because the letters behaved. Adaptive unified routing for optimal refrigerated assets. And because light shows up where people think there is only cold. I brought in a secret co-conspirator, Priya Desai, senior analyst at Vale, overlooked because she wore cardigans instead of bravado. I asked her to meet me at a library 2 zip codes from headquarters. She arrived with a laptop covered in stickers about statistics and chai and took the seat across from me like she'd been waiting to be invited into something messy and worth it. I need a ghost, I said. Quiet, precise, allergic to slop. Off the record, off the servers. She tilted her head. You want me to model something you're not supposed to be building? I want you to model something we're going to build right, I said. And I'll make sure you get credit when it matters. She studied my face for lies and found none. Okay, she said. What's the delta? Conservative, 5 points, I said. Aggressive, 8. The kicker is predictability. If we can make failure less chaotic, everyone can plan around it. She cracked her knuckles like a pianist and started typing. We set inputs, argued about assumptions, chased our own biases down side streets. Her laugh came out like punctuation when I said something grim but true. We ate vending machine pretzels and drank vending machine coffee because greatness loves low ceilings at the beginning. I kept the drafts local, printed hard copies, signed and dated margins like affidavits. Every night, I backed up to an encrypted drive that lived in a shoebox under my winter boots. Every day, I reminded myself that fear is just respect wearing a hoodie. The one-pager took shape, clean, auditable, impatient. We sketched a 3-stage pilot, 2 urban hospitals with different chaos signatures, and 1 rural clinic where time has the meanest hands. Vendor shortlist. A sensor company that underpromises, a regional carrier run by a woman who used to be a nurse, and a data firm with dull branding and bright ethics. I included a training module that paid drivers more for compliance than speed. Treat the humans like adults. They behave like guardians. At dusk on Sunday, Priya slid me a printed chart. If Aurora performs at baseline, she said, eyes glittering behind tired, Vale writes off 20% less inventory by Q3. My hands shook again, but this time from awe. We're not saving product, I said. We're saving mornings, nurses' mornings, parents' mornings. Don't put that in the deck, she deadpanned, and we both laughed because we knew we would. At 1:57 a.m., I typed the last period. At 2:03, I retyped it cleaner. I attached the PDF to an email addressed to a man who smelled like markets and mercy. I hovered a second, thought of the galas I'd survive and the rooms I'd rebuild, and hit send. At 2:11 a.m., Jackson replied with 3 words. Let's meet Tuesday. Jackson picked the loudest table in the room, so we could speak freely. The restaurant was a bistro that pretended to be casual, the way billionaires pretend to be middle class. Reclaimed wood, Edison bulbs, a sommelier with visible tattoos. Jackson waved me over to a corner where the noise made us private. He didn't let the server pour him charm. He ordered sparkling water, handed me the wine list, and said, "Your one-pager reads like a scalpel." I'd worn a blazer that didn't apologize. "Priya helped," I said. "Quiet genius." He nodded. "Hire people who scare you with their brains. Keep them safe with your spine." We walked through Aurora's bones, and he pushed where it would hurt in the wild. What happens when the dashboard pings at 3 a.m. and the only driver near the clinic is on a smoke break? What if the hospital's doc is a Kafka novel? How do you keep data honest when the incentive to fudge is a mortgage? Money distorts, I said. We design incentives that make reality cheaper than fiction. He smiled into his water. Good. He set down his fork and drew the contours of a deal with an index finger on the table. $7 million, he said. 2 now for the pilot. Your salary, 2 hires, sensors, vendor retainers. 5 on milestones. Loss reduction, on-time delivery, clinician satisfaction. Non-dilutive grant tied to performance, but I have conditions. Name them. You're named principal, he said, voice calm. Vendor selection is yours. I prefer Vale for scale, but only if you lead. I want this built by someone who understands clinics aren't factories. A laugh escaped me, sharp. They're cathedrals, messy ones. He tipped his head. And I want an LOI in your LLC's name. Monroe Strategies. Vale can subcontract until they prove they deserve more. I'm not financing your husband's ego. The server arrived with trout and a salad that thought it was a thesis. Jackson waited until she retreated, then continued. This is not charity, he said, tone suddenly steel. This is a test. If you're as good as your document, we change a corner of the industry. If not, we fail honestly and go home. I don't do dishonest failure, I said. I've already failed prettily. It bored me. We talked numbers until dessert. He made me show my math twice, then asked for a third demonstration, smiling when I didn't get flustered. I pressed him on oversight. He wanted monthly dashboards and the right to audit. Fine. I pushed back on scope creep. We locked it. I added a clause that protected pilots from PR until results existed. He liked that more than he let on. He reached into his leather folio and slid a document across the table. Letter of intent. For a second, the paper looked like an exit sign. My name sat there in print. Tessa Monroe, Principal, Monroe Strategies LLC. The oxygen in my chest rearranged itself into something like courage. You'll need board buy-in, he said. But I've watched Malcolm for years. He worships outcomes. Give him respectable inevitability, and he calls it vision. And Grayson? Jackson's mouth tilted. Some men only respect what they can't stop. I traced the bottom of the LOI with my finger like it might smudge. This could make enemies, I said. Good, Jackson echoed, the way a choir echoes a hymn. You'll know you're moving something real. He slid the unsigned LOI across the table. Bring this to your board and watch who underestimates you now. The email looked like a calendar invite. The attachment was a trap. Tuesday morning, my Vail inbox pinged with an invite to Pilot Alignment, Aurora. The sender, Owen Briggs. My breath snagged. I hadn't sent anything to Owen. The attachment was a PDF with a file name that tried too hard to look legitimate. Priya, saint of due diligence, caught it before I could. Don't open, she texted. It beacons out. Looks like credential phishing. I closed the laptop like it was hissing. The invite sat there, innocuous as a smile. I forwarded it to my attorney and to a private security firm Jackson had recommended with 3 words: assume compromise, contain. Then I drove to an electronics store where no one knew my name and bought a blank, homely laptop and a printer that whispered. Operational security became a verb. I printed hard copies, signed dates in ink, stored backups in places Grayson didn't enter because he thought closets cleaned themselves. I moved meetings to a cafe that serves oatmeal like absolution. I spoke in basics, wrote in specifics, and slept with my phone in airplane mode inside the hotel Bible because it amused me to make surveillance kneel. Then Evelyn invited me to brunch. She chose a place with linen so crisp it could file your nails. Tessa, she said, with that careful warmth reserved for charities and interns, I worry you're overextending. She didn't touch her coffee. Grayson thrives under calm, and lately, things feel noisy. I like noise, I said, bright. It warns you you're alive. She smiled like I was temporary. Sweetheart, there's no shame in stepping back before you embarrass the family. A year ago, I would have shrunk my bones to fit her sentence. Today, I ordered dessert before the omelet arrived. No, I said. Her eyes lifted a millimeter. No? No. We ate in exquisite silence. I paid the bill with my own card because sometimes independence needs a receipt. By afternoon, IT pinged me with a routine password reset. I changed nothing. Priya sent me a screenshot of Owen lurking near the printer bank, wearing boredom like cologne. I laughed and texted her a gif of a raccoon washing cotton candy, a loss nobody acknowledges in the budget. At dusk, my phone lit up with a familiar number I hadn't given permission to have. Heard you're shopping around a logistics vanity project, Owen said, voice lazy. Fun idea. Might want to loop grown-ups. Noted, I said, and hung up. Then I changed my number. Friends learn fast. Parasites can hunt. I thought the day's adrenaline had peaked until my secure email pinged with a forwarded document. The subject line screamed in lowercase. Uh-oh. Attached was my LOI, except it wasn't. The terms were laughable, the milestones arbitrary, the numbers fat with wishful thinking. The version was watermarked internal draft and circulated to a distro list I didn't recognize. Someone wanted me to look foolish before I arrived. I stared at the counterfeit and felt something like delight. They were scared enough to fake me. That meant I was real enough to fight. Then the LOI leaked, except not the version I sent. Someone doctored my projections to make me look foolish. They forgot I kept the originals. I printed the fake LOI and marked its sins in red like a strict teacher. Milestones that measured optics instead of outcomes. A contingency clause that handed vendor choice to executive discretion. Translation, Grayson. A forecast curve that looked like a ski slope for cocaine optimism. Sloppy. Owen's fingerprints, or the fingerprints of whatever consultant he paid to confirm his laziness. I didn't storm. I packed a folder. Authentic LOI, Priya's models, and a one-page comparison labeled Truth versus Theater. Then I texted Ivy Chen. 5 minutes? Off the record. My office. Door closed. She replied in less time than it takes to fake sincerity. 4 minutes. She arrived carrying a legal pad and a face that never begged. You have 3, she said, sitting without wasting posture. I laid out the papers like tarot. Someone is circulating a counterfeit version of my LOI. It replaces measurable outcomes with vibes. It hands procurement to whoever flatters best. It would make me look unserious. I am not unserious. Ivy did not smile. She read. She read like eating. Efficient, appreciative of good seasoning. Where did you get these numbers? She asked, tapping Priya's model. Built with Priya, verified against insurer loss data and public filings from 3 manufacturers. Ivy's pen paused. And the 7? Jackson Reed, I said. Conditional, performance tied. In my LLC's name with Vale as subcontractor during the pilot. Her eyes flicked up, quick and sharp. Your husband knows? Not yet. She absorbed that like a pill with edges. You realize this starts a war. I'm tired of being a boarder, I said. She looked back at the fake LOI. This is amateur. Owen? Likely, I said. But I won't guess. I just want the math to survive long enough to be believed. Ivy stood. She closed the folder and reopened it, aligning the papers with surgical precision. I hate sloppy numbers, she said, a confession dressed as policy. Email me the authentic deck from a secure address. I will validate quietly. No promises. Thank you, I said, meaning it like oxygen. Don't thank me yet, she replied. If you're wrong, I will bury this and you'll owe me a mistake. If you're right, I'll owe you a witness. She left as efficiently as she had arrived. I exhaled the breath I'd been hoarding since the gala and pinged Priya with a single word. Moving. The hour between risk and response stretched. I cleaned my desk like a ritual. I deleted a photo of Grayson and me from a company retreat where we pretended to kayak. I drafted a text to Jackson. Contamination attempt, intercepting. Then deleted it because competence needs fewer witnesses than panic. My phone buzzed exactly 60 minutes later. Ivy. Projections check out. Want a witness? I looked at the words until they steadied. Want a witness. I wanted 1,000. I wanted one who counted. I typed, yes. Boardroom. Tomorrow. My hands didn't shake. The sun had started its orange apology across the city when I finally stood, rolled my shoulders, and felt the first clean fear of a new life. The fake numbers had tried to make me small. The real ones had made me dangerous. Ivy texted 1 hour later. Projections check out. Want a witness? When I walked into the boardroom, Grayson didn't stand. I made the table do it instead. The mahogany looked like it remembered every deal ever made on it, every smile that wasn't about joy. The city glared in through floor-to-ceiling glass, impatient. I wore a navy suit that fit like a verdict and set down 3 folders. Aurora Pilot, Validated Projections, LOI, Monroe Strategies. Malcolm Pierce checked his Rolex the way some men check their consciences. Briefly, performatively. Ivy slid into her seat, expression arranged in the neutral that terrifies liars. Owen lounged, chewing a pen cap like it owed him money. Evelyn took a chair against the wall, pearls neat, judgment neater. Grayson leaned back like a king slumming it in Parliament. Mrs. Vale, Malcolm said, politeness at half charge. Director Candidate Monroe, I corrected gently, and opened the first folder. Thank you for the time. Grayson smirked. We've got 10 minutes before real business. Then we won't waste them, I said. Problem. Cold chain drift is killing biologics and margins. Industry average compromise is 18 to 22% between warehouse and administration. Our write-offs track the same. That's not a leak. It's a hole. I clicked to the first slide. Priya's graphs were elegant bullies. Solution: Aurora, adaptive unified routing for optimal refrigerated assets, sensorized containers, predictive alerts, dynamic re-icing. Driver incentives aligned with medicine, not mileage. 3-site pilot, 3 months, 3 KPIs, loss reduction, on-time delivery, clinician satisfaction. Owen lifted a lazy hand. And what does this cost the company, net? $7 million in external funding, I said. 2 upfront, 5 on performance milestones, non-dilutive, provided by Reed Biotech. A breath stirred. Even men who pretend they don't read the news read that name. Malcolm leaned forward. Reed? Jackson Reed? Yes, I said. Conditional on 2 things. Monroe Strategies LLC named principal. Vale Dynamics as subcontractor for scale during pilot. Vendor selection controlled by the principal to preserve integrity. Grayson laughed, delighted. So you want us to play second fiddle to your Vanity LLC? I didn't look at him. I want this done right. I don't care who gets Instagrammed. I care who gets insulin. Ivy cleared her throat. We validated the projections independently, she said. Heads turned. Assumptions are conservative. Modeled reductions are credible. Downside risk is mitigated by staging and stop-loss triggers in month 1. Thank you, I said, like we hadn't texted at midnight with our hearts in our throats. Evelyn's voice arrived cool. And why must you be principal, Tessa? We have professionals. Because the deal exists because of me, I said. Because Reed won't fund a process he can't trust. Because procurement has been porous. I let the word sit beside Owen until it perfumed the air. He bristled. Allegations? Observations, Ivy replied, neutral as glass. Malcolm steepled his fingers. Walk us through risk. I did. Compliance audits, data custody, insurance riders. A kill switch that ended the pilot if variance exceeded thresholds. I had rehearsed for contempt. I got curiosity, then respect, which felt like standing under a real sun after weeks of hotel lamps. Last question, Malcolm said. Upside? Patients get medicine that works, I said. We cut waste. We build a repeatable profit engine out of not failing people. And if we succeed, Vale stops reacting and starts leading in a space everyone pretends is boring until it INES on fire. I closed the folder. If the pilot is adopted as presented and my origination triggers recognized, I will invoke the Rainmaker provision in our corporate governance. I will accept a voting board seat for 1 term to steward the pilot. Grayson laughed again, but softer now. This is theatrics. Ivy slid a sheet into the center. Governance Clause 12.4. The language is clear. Silence moved in, expensive and fragile. I didn't fill it. I'd brought enough sound. Grayson finally scoffed, waving at Malcolm. We indulge a lot of side projects, but this... Malcolm cleared his throat. Mr. Vale, perhaps you should let your wife finish. They didn't clap when I stopped talking. They counted. Questions came like hail, quick and cold. Malcolm wanted costs if a vendor failed mid-pilot. I laid out redundancy agreements, penalties, and a Rolodex of backups. A board member on the screen asked about regulatory snarls. I cited CFR codes like I'd been born memorizing them and offered templates already blessed by counsel. Owen tried to nick the numbers. These shrink rates are fantasy, he said. Ivy's eyebrow rose a millimeter. They're conservative, she said. I'd be bored to defend them if they weren't. Evelyn tilted her head. And how do we prevent this from becoming a publicity circus? I included a communications blackout until milestones, I said. No press, no panels, only results. Jackson joined by video, a rectangle of calm. Evening, he said, as if we were talking about weather. I've reviewed Ms. Monroe's materials. The rigor is uncommon, the humility is better. $7 million is not a gamble. It's tuition. You'll graduate with a new competence or a data-driven reason to avoid it. Either outcome is worth the check. Malcolm's mouth twitched. Appreciate the candor, Mr. Reed. One more thing, Jackson added, eyes sliding briefly to me. I don't back vanity. I back systems. This is a system. The screen blinked out. The room inhaled. I felt my pulse in my wrists, a drumline under polished wood. Jackson Reed, I said. Conditional, performance-tied, in my LLC's name with Vale as subcontractor during the pilot. Her eyes flicked up, quick and sharp. Your husband knows? Not yet. She absorbed that like a pill with edges. You realize this starts a war. I'm tired of being a boarder, I said. She looked back at the fake LOI. This is amateur. Owen? Likely, I said. But I won't guess. I just want the math to survive long enough to be believed. Ivy stood. She closed the folder and reopened it, aligning the papers with surgical precision. I hate sloppy numbers, she said, a confession dressed as policy. Email me the authentic deck from a secure address. I will validate quietly. No promises. Thank you, I said, meaning it like oxygen. Don't thank me yet, she replied. If you're wrong, I will bury this, and you'll owe me a mistake. If you're right, I'll owe you a witness. She left as efficiently as she had arrived. I exhaled the breath I'd been hoarding since the gala and pinged Priya with a single word. Moving. The hour between risk and response stretched. I cleaned my desk like a ritual. I deleted a photo of Grayson and me from a company retreat where we pretended to kayak. I drafted a text to Jackson. Contamination attempt. Intercepting. Then deleted it because competence needs fewer witnesses than panic. My phone buzzed exactly 60 minutes later. Ivy. Projections check out. Want a witness? I looked at the words until they steadied. Want a witness? I wanted 1,000. I wanted one who counted. I typed, yes. Boardroom. Tomorrow. My hands didn't shake. The sun had started its orange apology across the city when I finally stood, rolled my shoulders, and felt the first clean fear of a new life. The fake numbers had tried to make me small. The real ones had made me dangerous. Ivy texted 1 hour later. Projections check out. Want a witness? When I walked into the boardroom, Grayson didn't stand. I made the table do it instead. The mahogany looked like it remembered every deal ever made on it, every smile that wasn't about joy. The city glared in through floor-to-ceiling glass, impatient. I wore a navy suit that fit like a verdict and set down 3 folders. Aurora Pilot, Validated Projections, LOI, Monroe Strategies. Malcolm Pierce checked his Rolex the way some men check their consciences. Briefly, performatively. Ivy slid into her seat, expression arranged in the neutral that terrifies liars. Owen lounged, chewing a pen cap like it owed him money. Evelyn took a chair against the wall, pearls neat, judgment neater. Grayson leaned back like a king slumming it in Parliament. Mrs. Vale, Malcolm said, politeness at half charge. Director Candidate Monroe, I corrected gently, and opened the first folder. Thank you for the time. Grayson smirked. We've got 10 minutes before real business. Then we won't waste them, I said. Problem. Cold chain drift is killing biologics and margins. Industry average compromise is 18 to 22% between warehouse and administration. Our write-offs track the same. That's not a leak, it's a hole. I clicked to the first slide. Priya's graphs were elegant bullies. Solution. Aurora. Adaptive unified routing for optimal refrigerated assets. Sensorized containers. Predictive alerts. Dynamic re-icing. Driver incentives aligned with medicine, not mileage. 3-site pilot, 3 months, 3 KPIs. Loss reduction. On-time delivery. Clinician satisfaction. Owen lifted a lazy hand. And what does this cost the company, net? $7 million in external funding, I said. 2 up front, 5 on performance milestones. Non-dilutive, provided by Reed Biotech. A breath stirred. Even men who pretend they don't read the news read that name. Malcolm leaned forward. Reed? Jackson Reed? Yes, I said. Conditional on 2 things. Monroe Strategies LLC named principal. Vale Dynamics as subcontractor for scale during pilot. Vendor selection controlled by the principal to preserve integrity. Grayson laughed, delighted. So you want us to play second fiddle to your Vanity LLC? I didn't look at him. I want this done right. I don't care who gets Instagrammed. I care who gets insulin. Ivy cleared her throat. We validated the projections independently, she said. Heads turned. Assumptions are conservative. Modeled reductions are credible. Downside risk is mitigated by staging and stop-loss triggers in month 1. Thank you, I said, like we hadn't texted at midnight with our hearts in our throats. Evelyn's voice arrived cool. And why must you be principal, Tessa? We have professionals. Because the deal exists because of me, I said. Because Reed won't fund a process he can't trust. Because procurement has been porous. I let the word sit beside Owen until it perfumed the air. He bristled. Allegations? Observations, Ivy replied, neutral as glass. Malcolm steepled his fingers. Walk us through risk. I did. Compliance audits, data custody, insurance riders. A kill switch that ended the pilot if variance exceeded thresholds. I had rehearsed for contempt. I got curiosity, then respect, which felt like standing under a real sun after weeks of hotel lamps. Last question, Malcolm said. Upside? Patients get medicine that works, I said. We cut waste. We build a repeatable profit engine out of not failing people. And if we succeed, Vale stops reacting and starts leading in a space everyone pretends is boring until it S on fire. I closed the folder. If the pilot is adopted as presented and my origination triggers recognized, I will invoke the Rainmaker provision in our corporate governance. I will accept a voting board seat for 1 term to steward the pilot. Grayson laughed again, but softer now. This is theatrics. Ivy slid a sheet into the center. Governance Clause 12.4. The language is clear. Silence moved in, expensive and fragile. I didn't fill it. I'd brought enough sound. Grayson finally scoffed, waving at Malcolm. We indulge a lot of side projects, but this... Malcolm cleared his throat. Mr. Vale, perhaps you should let your wife finish. They didn't clap when I stopped talking. They counted. Questions came like hail, quick and cold. Malcolm wanted costs if a vendor failed mid-pilot. I laid out redundancy agreements, penalties, and a Rolodex of backups. A board member on the screen asked about regulatory snarls. I cited CFR codes like I'd been born memorizing them and offered templates already blessed by counsel. Owen tried to nick the numbers. These shrink rates are fantasy, he said. Ivy's eyebrow rose a millimeter. They're conservative, she said. I'd be bored to defend them if they weren't. Evelyn tilted her head. And how do we prevent this from becoming a publicity circus? I included a communications blackout until milestones, I said. No press, no panels, only results. Jackson joined by video, a rectangle of calm. Evening, he said, as if we were talking about weather. I've reviewed Ms. Monroe's materials. The rigor is uncommon. The humility is better. $7 million is not a gamble. It's tuition. You'll graduate with a new competence or a data-driven reason to avoid it. Either outcome is worth the check. Malcolm's mouth twitched. Appreciate the candor, Mr. Reed. One more thing, Jackson added, eyes sliding briefly to me. I don't back vanity. I back systems. This is a system. The screen blinked out. The room inhaled. I felt my pulse in my wrists, a drum line under polished wood. Evelyn caught me outside the elevators, pearls armed. Traitor, she said softly, so the cameras wouldn't pick it up. You marry into a family and then you light it on fire? I married a man, I said. Not a reputation. And I didn't light anything. I turned on the lights. Her lips pinched. Do you feel powerful doing this to him? Righteous, I said. Power is weather. Righteous is climate. Malcolm pressed for timelines, for clarity, for surgical precision in language. Ivy insisted every comma line up with a fact. Owen grew skittish, as if the walls had learned his name. He sent me 3 emails with smiley faces he'd never used before. I didn't reply. He sent Priya a request for collaboration. She forwarded it to me and to legal with the subject no. At home, or what passed for home now, an extended stay suite with a small kitchen and a stubborn lamp. I folded laundry like penance. The condo felt radioactive. Grayson texted once, "We should talk." I didn't answer. He called twice. I let the rings count themselves and go nowhere. You can't negotiate meaning with someone who loves mirrors. Then a journalist found my private email. Off the record, do you feel safe at home? My breath stitched, unstitched. Off the record carries seduction. It promises you can tell the truth without paying the toll. It's also rarely true. I stared at the question and understood what she was really asking. Are we about to report a scandal or a crime scene? I typed and deleted 10 drafts. Finally, no comment. Then, to legal. We have press sniffing. Prepare holding lines, but no statements until the investigation concludes. That night, I dreamed of elevators that never opened. In the morning, I woke to a text from a number I recognized by the ache it created. Open the door. He was outside my suite. He shouldn't have known where it was. Fear is a tuning fork. It vibrates you into clarity. I didn't open. I called the front desk and asked for security. I texted my attorney, Lena Brooks, a woman whose brain was case law braided into compassion. By noon, investigators had requested copies of security footage from Gala night for context. A server I barely remembered sent an email through the anonymous portal. I have audio. My heart pounded a yes I didn't say out loud. The pattern was no longer an anecdote. It had timestamps. It had witnesses. It had a future that wasn't going to wait for me to be ready. Then a journalist emailed me. Off the record. Do you feel safe at home? Turns out, humiliation wears a tux and loves a hot mic. The email came from a burner address with a subject line that felt like a hand on my shoulder. For you, if it helps. Attached, an audio file. I put on headphones and pressed play. The room returned. The clink of cutlery, the auctioneer's patter, laughter engineered to be symmetrical. And then his voice. Crisp. Confident. Cutting me into a laugh line and passing me around like dessert. Men guffawed. Women's laughter trailed off, uncertain. My name cracked in half and slid across the floor. I sent the file to counsel first, fingerprints of chain of custody all over the metadata. Then I sat there with the headphones cupping my ears like evidence and cried once, quietly, because hearing the moment you were minimized from outside your skin is a particular grief. Priya texted a meme about raccoons with flashlights. I typed back a heart, because sometimes love is a tiny light you allow. Legal asked for context. I typed a timeline so precise it could have been an alibi. They looped in PR, who wrote statements they prayed they'd never have to issue. Malcolm requested a closed session. Ivy drafted 3 versions of a response tree that all ended in process, not press. I agreed. I wanted the record to hold more than Twitter could. For a minute, I considered leaking. Anger wants spectacle the way a wound wants air, but procedure is what protects the truth from theater. So I delivered the file to the investigators and the board and resisted the sweet, sharp urge to burn it all down in public. Quiet can be tactical when it's not coerced. That evening, the condo door I no longer called mine opened and slammed. He had a key. Of course he had a key. "Tessa!" Grayson shouted, his voice already at volume 10 because men like him confuse loud with right. I'd come to collect 2 boxes of books and a sweater that smelled like a life I missed. I shouldn't have been there alone. Regret is always punctual. He found me in the study, my hand still on a framed photo of us on a cliff in Big Sur, pretending we liked the same horizon. "We need to get on the same page," he said, jaw tight. "You are embarrassing me in front of my board." "You embarrassed yourself," I said, calm, anchored by adrenaline. He laughed, the sound I used to mistake for charm. "You leaked something," he accused. "Clever, vindictive." "I followed procedure," I said. "There's an investigation. I gave them what existed." He stepped closer, too close. "Do you like this power?" he snarled. "Does it feel good?" "It feels necessary," I said. I kept my hands visible. I knew where my phone was. I knew where the door was. I knew the shape of his shoulders when he was about to perform. The argument wasn't cinematic. It was stupid and sharp, 1,000 small cuts. He called me ungrateful. I said the word no enough times it sounded like a spell. The walls listened. So did my phone, recording in my pocket because instincts can be trained. He slammed his palm against the shelf beside my head, not touching me, touching everything. "You think Malcolm will keep you when this blows over? You think Ivy's your friend? You're cute, Tessa. Cute doesn't last." Somewhere in the building, a dog barked once like a gavel. I slipped past him, heart galloping, and reached the door. He shouted my name again, a weapon. I walked out. Grayson stormed into our condo at midnight and made the mistake of raising his voice, again. The last time he shouted in my face, the walls were listening. I didn't trust my shaking hands, so I trusted my checklist. I stepped into the hallway, called the concierge to log the disturbance, and texted the building manager to confirm security footage retention. Then, I opened a shared folder and uploaded the audio from my pocket. My voice sounded small and steady. His sounded like a man trying to outrun a mirror. I called my attorney, Lena Brooks. She answered on the second ring, voice already coiled. "Are you safe?" "I'm not hurt," I said. "But I'm done." "Good," she said, her favorite word. "Pack a go bag. Don't stay there. I'll file for legal separation in the morning and request a temporary protective order. We keep this about conduct, not headlines. Do you have a place?" I checked into an extended stay hotel under my maiden name, Monroe. The clerk did not recognize me, which felt like mercy. I paid with a card tied to my own account, a thin river of money I'd kept dammed out of habit and found grateful now. I bought a burner phone because paranoia upgrades into prudence fast. I showered forever and cried for exactly 3 minutes, an appointment I kept so grief wouldn't colonize the whole day. In the morning, Lena drafted filings with a precision that felt like armor. We gathered documentation, texts, emails, my condo log call, the audio. She reminded me not to engage directly. "He wants a scene," she said. "Don't audition." At the office, I set boundaries like guardrails. HR locked in procedures regarding any contact from Grayson to pilot staff. Security badges were reissued for relevant floors. My board communications moved onto council-verified channels. Malcolm didn't send sympathy. He sent expectations. "Deliver," he said. "We'll handle the rest." Priya hugged me like she was anchoring a tent in wind. "I've got the dashboards," she said, business as blanket. "You get the life stuff." The company leaked anyway, because companies are colanders. A trade blog ran a blind item so transparent you could see the fingerprints. PR called with scripts. I chose the shortest one. "We respect the independent process and have no further comment at this time." Then I hung up and went back to building a system designed to save medicine from heat and men from hubris. At night, in the hotel, I made tea in a plastic cup and stared at a painting of a sailboat that had never touched water. I let myself catalog the small domestic violences that never bruise, the jokes, the eye rolls, the decisions made for me with a smile. I didn't make him a monster. I didn't make me a saint. I made a plan. Lena filed. A judge signed. We served. The papers had weight. I could feel them even when I wasn't holding them. Grayson texted Coward and then, minutes later, we can fix this. I didn't respond to either. Contradiction is a tactic. Silence is a decision. The next board session loomed like weather everyone could smell. 2 agendas, really. Aurora status and leadership conduct review. I prepared for both with the same rigor. Because the cruelest trick patriarchy ever pulled was convincing women we can to walk and govern at the same time. The morning of, I buttoned my suit with hands that had stopped shaking and walked into a room that had decided it was time to choose. I took my seat and opened my folder to the page that began, calmly, with a list of outcomes, and ended, mercifully, with a future. The next board session would decide 2 things: his future and mine. They expected me to want an apology. I brought a term sheet. Closed session. Counsel present. Minutes taken by a woman whose poker face could have won wars. The investigators delivered findings. Substantiated incidents of demeaning conduct. Patterns of retaliation against staff who resisted unreasonable demands, and attempted interference with an ongoing pilot's procurement process. Words like culture risk threaded through the report like barbed wire. This wasn't a scandal. It was a liability. Grayson's attorney argued context. He used the word misunderstood until it lost its vowels. He offered training, coaching, a sabbatical in a place with palm trees and NDAs. Malcolm listened with the expression of a man reading a weather forecast he'd already felt in his bones. Ivy asked 3 questions, each a scalpel disguised as curiosity. Evelyn sat statue still, diamonds catching light like accusations. They turned to me. Remedies? Malcolm asked. I slid a document forward. Resolution framework. We stabilize the company, finish the pilot, clean the pipes, I said. We don't drag this through a PR coliseum if we can avoid it. Bullet points, not poetry. Grayson resigns as CEO, effective immediately, transitions to advisor for 90 days with no operational authority, then separates. Owen Briggs terminated for cause based on cyber audit findings. Governance reforms, independent hotline renewals, procurement firewall, quarterly culture audits reported to the board. Priya Desai promoted to Director of Operations for Aurora. I remain on the board for 1 term to steward pilot and transition. In exchange, I continued, Monroe Strategies licenses Aurora IP to Vail at fair market rate with a royalty structure tied to realized savings, not promises. The company issues a public apology acknowledging harm and commits to a code of conduct refresh company-wide. Silence, then the small music of papers being considered. Grayson scoffed. You want a payout? I want alignment, I said. I built something that works. You get to use it. I get paid like a builder instead of thanked like a spouse. Ivy looked at Malcolm, then at me. Royalty tied to realized savings, she repeated, tasting the words. Elegant. Evelyn whispered, This will ruin him. Consequences don't ruin people, I said. Patterns do. Counsel cleared his throat. These terms mitigate litigation risk and protect enterprise value, he said, the language of a man who sleeps after fires. Malcolm tapped the table. We could drag this out, or we can make a clean cut. He looked at Grayson. You built value here. You also built something else. Time to stop. Grayson leaned back, rage held by expensive tailoring. You'll destroy the company, he spat at me. I'm saving it, I said, because I still believe in what it could be when it grows up. He laughed, but it had less oxygen in it now. Malcolm slid a pen toward me, then toward him. Mrs. Monroe, will you accept if we add one more condition? I met his eyes. What condition? He steepled his fingers again, habit of a man who enjoys symmetry. We fund something that outlasts this mess. Define something, I said, already writing the next clause in my head. Malcolm slid the pen toward me. Mrs. Monroe, will you accept if we add one more condition? Power sounds like a signature. The condition was simple and seismic. An equity grant pool earmarked for women and underrepresented leaders in operations and engineering, vesting over 4 years, plus a funded mentorship program named Not For Me, but for what we were building, Aurora Fellows. I negotiated scope and governance so it wouldn't turn into a glossy brochure. Independent selection committee, real budgets, metrics that measured promotions, not panels. We signed. Ink made sounds I'd never heard before. A soft scrape, a future swallowing. Council gathered papers with the tenderness of a man escorting fragile artifacts. Malcolm exhaled. Long. Ivy's mouth allowed a private millimeter of relief. PR toggled from dormant to surgical. The press release hit at 4:03 p.m., a time chosen for markets and mercy. Veil Dynamics announces leadership transition. Independent review concludes. Aurora pilot greenlit under director Tessa Monroe. It was the kind of sentence that keeps 10 lawyers employed. Buried in paragraph 3 were the reforms. Centered was the work. My phone exploded. Friends, strangers. A text from Jackson. Just one word. Proud. I stared at it until my eyes watered. Then I typed back. Delivering. Grayson resigned with a statement that had been boiled until it tasted like nothing. Evelyn's silence made more noise than any quote could. Owen's access cut off in real time. I watched his email go dark on the admin panel and felt zero guilt. HR scheduled listening sessions. The hotline company doubled staff for a quarter. People walked around the office like gravity had shifted half a degree. I packed the last of my things from the condo with 2 movers and a locksmith. I kept the books, left the furniture. I filed for divorce the next morning at 9:01 a.m. because I like numbers that start with beginnings. Lena hugged me in the courthouse hallway and said, "You did something hard and right. Those are rare twins." In the pilot, trucks started moving under new rules. Drivers texted the hotline the first time a sensor pinged near a rural clinic, and we rerouted to a gas station with dry ice like it was a miracle. Because it was, if you were the parent waiting for medicine that couldn't be late and couldn't be warm. The first month's numbers came in. Loss rates dipping, delivery windows tightening, satisfaction scores from nurses that read like bedtime stories. We didn't post them. We just smiled at each other in rooms that smelled like coffee and redeemed plans. At home, my new one, small and mine, I hung a corkboard with 3 columns: build, protect, teach. Under build, Aurora milestones. Under protect, legal dates, HR deadlines, mental health appointments I actually kept. Under teach, the fellows program curriculum, guest speakers who would talk about power without pretending it's polite. 2 weeks later, I stood at a charity gala again. Different dress, same chandeliers. A reporter leaned in, friendly sharp. "Do you miss being decor?" she asked, voice sugar. I smiled, not unkind. "No," I said, "but the architecture's better from up here." The quote made it to the sidebar, the place where women are allowed to be clever as long as the main story stays structural. Fine. The main story was structural. We had rebar now, where once there was ribbon. I went home and taped the press release to the inside of a cabinet for the days I'd need reminders that signatures are just verbs in ink. I tucked Jackson's one-word text into the same corner. I slept. For the first time in months, I didn't dream of elevators. At the next gala, a reporter asked if I missed being decor. I smiled. No, but the architecture's better from up here. A $7 contract didn't save me. It reminded me who I was before he taught me to doubt it. Aurora moved like weather you could schedule. By quarter 3, Cold chain losses at pilot sites dropped enough to make accountants use exclamation points in private. The rural clinic sent a thank you photo of a refrigerator with a sticky note, "She's on time now." We framed it in the operations bullpen where trophies should go. Insurers called to ask for playbooks. Manufacturers took the tour and didn't dither. We replicated with boring devotion, the kind that scales. Vale's stock stopped behaving like a nervous animal. Analysts wrote phrases I wanted to embroider on sweatshirts: execution discipline, operational moat, culture reset. I didn't buy the sweatshirt. I bought Priya a ridiculous, beautiful pen and a vacation she wasn't allowed to decline. She came back with freckles and 5 ideas, like a person who trusts tomorrow. The board restructured committees. Ivy became a CFO-COO hybrid with jurisdiction and teeth. Malcolm retired one metaphor he loved about war rooms and started saying care rooms when he forgot himself. HR acted like the conscience it had always been hired to imitate. The hotline didn't go quiet. It went useful. Patterns changed. When people asked me if culture really shifts, I said, not by asking it to, by paying it to. My divorce finalized on a Tuesday that tasted like clean water. I kept my royalties, my stake in the Fellows program, and my last name, Monroe, the one that fit in my mouth like a promise I wrote myself. I moved into an apartment with plants that lived, and a kitchen that smelled like cumin and friends. I deleted photos without deleting the parts of me that had loved. Grief decayed into compost and fed something green. The Aurora Fellows launched their first cohort. Dispatchers who wanted to become directors, analysts with leadership bones, drivers with maps in their heads and potential in their hands. We paid stipends. We didn't put them on panels. We put them in rooms where budgets are born. Success looked like promotions, not speeches. Jackson and I met once a quarter to review dashboards and argue about thresholds the way people who respect each other do. He never asked me about my personal life unless he was asking if I was resting enough to protect the project. When the 5 million milestone clicked and the second tranche wired, he texted, "Onward." We didn't celebrate. We built. Evelyn passed me once at an event and said nothing. Silence can be surrender, or it can be grief. I let it be both, and moved on. Owen started a consultancy with vague verbs. Grayson gave a keynote in another city about resilience, and looked thinner. I didn't watch the clip. I don't diet on other people's consequences. The next luxury gala came around like clockwork. I arrived alone, on the board's arm, which is to say, on my own feet. The velvet ropes recognized my badge this time, the way recognition always lags, but eventually learns. Cameras flashed. I smiled because I meant it. The auctioneer thumped the mic. I looked up at the chandeliers and didn't think of humiliation. I thought of electricity. A young woman in a black dress I recognized, hopeful, brave, slipped past and whispered, "Your story helped me ask for a raise." I took her hand and squeezed. "Good," I said. "Ask for budget next." On my way out, I paused by the loading dock where the real Gala lives, carts, crates, men and women moving the night. A truck backed up, beeping. Someone's radio crackled a song I loved in college. I breathed in the cold air and felt a quiet that didn't ask me to disappear to earn it. A $7 million contract didn't save me. I saved me. The money just amplified the signal so the people who needed to hear could. And if you're listening, wondering if you're decor, consider this your invitation to build the room.